I don't shake hands with staff. Those 6 words, dripping with contempt, would cost Leonard Harrison everything: his company, his reputation, and $2 billion. When the billionaire CEO refused to acknowledge the black woman standing in his boardroom, he had no idea she controlled more wealth than his entire company was worth. What happened next sent shockwaves through Silicon Valley and changed how corporate America thinks about power forever. Stay with me until the end of this incredible true story, and drop a comment about which city you're watching from. I love seeing how far these stories travel. The November rain pelted against the towering glass facade of Terranova Technologies headquarters in downtown San Francisco, each droplet racing down the 40-story building like tears on a giant's face. Inside the marble lobby, Olivia Johnson stood perfectly still, her Hermes briefcase in one hand, her phone in the other. She had arrived precisely at 9:00 a.m. for a meeting that would determine the fate of billions. At 38, Olivia possessed the kind of presence that made rooms reorganize themselves around her when people actually noticed her. Today, she had chosen her armor carefully, a charcoal Tom Ford suit that cost more than most people's monthly salary, paired with understated Louboutin pumps that clicked authority with every step. Her natural hair was pulled back in an elegant bun that emphasized her high cheekbones and the intensity of her dark eyes. Everything about her appearance whispered power, but apparently the receptionist at Terranova's front desk was deaf to whispers. "Name," the young blonde woman asked without looking up from her computer screen, her acrylic nails clicking against the keyboard in a rhythm that suggested she'd rather be anywhere else. "Olivia Johnson. I have a 9:15 with Mr. Harrison." The receptionist's fingers paused mid-click. She looked up, and Olivia caught the exact moment when assumption crashed into confusion in the young woman's blue eyes. The gaze traveled from Olivia's face to her suit, lingered on the briefcase, then snapped back to the computer screen as if seeking refuge in the familiar glow of the monitor. Johnson, she muttered, scrolling through what appeared to be a calendar. "I don't see— Oh wait, are you here for the catering setup? The executive dining room is on the 15th floor. Olivia's expression didn't change, but something shifted in the air around her, like the atmospheric pressure drop before a storm. "No, I'm here for the investment evaluation meeting, the one scheduled 3 weeks ago through Mr. Harrison's chief of staff." "Investment. Evaluation." The receptionist's voice pitched up at the end, transforming a statement into a question. She looked at Olivia again this time, with the kind of scrutiny reserved for suspicious packages left unattended in airports. "Let me just call upstairs." Olivia watched as the receptionist picked up the phone, cupping her hand over the receiver, in a gesture that was supposed to provide privacy, but didn't account for the marble walls that amplified whispers into announcements. "Hi, Sarah. It's Brittany at reception. There's a woman here who says she has a meeting with Mr. Harrison. And Olivia Johnson." Pause. No, she's black." Another pause. "She says it's about an investment evaluation." Longer pause. Okay, I'll send her there." Brittany hung up and turned back to Olivia with a smile that looked like it had been assembled from a kit labeled "Professional Courtesy, Some Assembly Required." "There seems to be some confusion. You can wait in the staff waiting area on the 3rd floor. Someone will come get you when they've sorted this out." "The staff waiting area." Olivia repeated her tone, neutral as Switzerland. "Yes, it's very comfortable. We just had it renovated. Take the elevator bank on your left. Not the executive elevators. Those are the ones with the gold doors to the 3rd floor. Turn right and you'll see it. Can't miss it." Olivia didn't move immediately. She stood there for exactly 3 seconds, long enough for discomfort to bloom in Brittany's chest like a toxic flower, then said, "Thank you for your guidance." The staff waiting area turned out to be a windowless room with the aesthetic appeal of a dentist's office circa 1995. Beige walls met beige carpet in a symphony of corporate blandness. The furniture looked like it had been selected by someone whose primary concern was ensuring no one would want to linger. 6 plastic chairs lined one wall facing a coffee table that held magazines so old they qualified as historical documents. Forbes from 2019 asked from its cover whether Bitcoin was dead. A copy of Time wondered if we were prepared for the pandemic. Olivia chose the least offensive chair and sat with the posture of someone who had learned long ago that dignity was not something others could give or take away. It was something you carried in your spine. She placed her briefcase beside her and checked her phone. 9:17 a.m. The meeting had been scheduled for 9:15. She pulled up the email chain confirming the meeting, reading Harrison's chief of staff's message from 3 weeks prior. Mr. Harrison is eager to discuss the potential investment opportunity with Johnson Capital. As requested, we've allocated the full morning for comprehensive discussions. The email had been CC'd to 12 people, none of whom had questioned the arrangement. At 9:30, Olivia sent a polite inquiry to Harrison's office. The response came back immediately. Running slightly behind, someone will collect you shortly. At 9:45, she sent another message. This time, no response. At 10 Hosrers, when the door finally opened, it wasn't Harrison's chief of staff who appeared, but a harried-looking young man whose ID badge identified him as an intern. His suit was too big, his tie was crooked, and he looked like he'd rather face a firing squad than be standing in that doorway. "Ms. Johnson, I'm supposed to bring you up." "Supposed to," Olivia noted, standing smoothly. How reassuring. The intern Tyler, according to his badge, led her through a maze of corridors that seemed designed to confuse. They passed the actual executive waiting area on the 15th floor, visible through glass doors, leather couches, original artwork, a view of the Golden Gate Bridge that photographers would kill for, a coffee bar that wouldn't look out of place in a 5-star hotel. 2 white men in expensive suits sat there scrolling through tablets while sipping what smelled like excellent espresso. "This way," Tyler said, guiding her past that oasis to another elevator bank. They rode up in silence to the 35th floor, where the C-suite offices occupied corners of the building like feudal kingdoms. The conference room Tyler led her to was impressive. Despite itself floor-to-ceiling windows, a table that could seat 20 video screens that emerged from hidden panels with the touch of a button. It was a room designed to intimidate, to make visitors feel small against the backdrop of corporate power. 5 men sat around the far end of the table, their conversation stopping abruptly when she entered. Leonard Harrison stood at the head of the table like a king holding court. At 55, he had the kind of aggressive fitness that came from personal trainers and the kind of tan that came from owning vacation homes in 3 time zones. His hair was silver in the way that suggested expensive stylists rather than age, and his suit probably cost more than Tyler the intern made in a month. When he smiled, it was the smile of a shark that had just spotted lunch. "Ah, you must be the Johnson Capital representative," he said, not moving from his position. "We were starting to wonder if you'd gotten lost." "Not lost," Olivia said, setting her briefcase on the table with a precision that made the sound echo. "I was waiting in your staff waiting area. For 45 minutes. Harrison's smile widened, showing teeth that had definitely been whitened past the point of nature. "Well, these things happen. Miscommunications. You know how it is." He didn't apologize. Olivia noted this, filed it away in the mental folder she'd been building since she'd walked into the building. Harrison's 4 companions, all white, all male, all wearing variations of the same expensive suit, watched her with expressions that ranged from curiosity to barely concealed amusement. She recognized the CFO Marcus Webb from his LinkedIn profile. The others were likely department heads brought in to provide a show of force. Harrison gestured to a chair at the far end of the table, as far from the power center as possible while still being in the same room. "Please have a seat." Olivia moved to the chair, but didn't sit immediately. Instead, she walked the length of the table, slowly, deliberately, her heels marking each step like a countdown. When she reached Harrison, she extended her hand in the universal gesture of professional greeting. "Olivia Johnson." She said, her voice carrying the kind of authority that made introductions sound like declarations. Harrison looked at her extended hand, as if she'd offered him a dead fish. His smile transformed into something colder, more dismissive. He actually took a small step back, clasped his hands behind his back, and delivered the words that would echo through boardrooms across the country for years to come. "I don't shake hands with staff." The room went silent. Not the comfortable silence of concentration or the awkward silence of social mishap, but the absolute silence that follows a grenade being thrown into a dinner party. Marcus Webb actually winced. One of the other executives, Olivia would later learn his name was Richard Stein, head of strategic development, covered his mouth with his hand as if trying to physically stop himself from gasping. Olivia held her hand extended for exactly 2 more seconds. 2 seconds during which the entire power dynamic of the room teetered on a knife's edge. Then she lowered it slowly, deliberately, and smiled. It wasn't a warm smile. It wasn't even a cold smile. It was the smile of someone who had just been handed a gift they didn't know they wanted. "Staff," she repeated, tasting the word like a sommelier testing wine. "How interesting." Harrison, oblivious to the seismic shift that had just occurred, had already turned back to his seat. "Shall we begin?" "I assume you've prepared some initial numbers for us to review. We're very busy here at Terranova, and I'd hate to waste everyone's time if Johnson Capital isn't serious about this opportunity." Olivia finally sat, placing her briefcase on the table and opening it with clicks that sounded like bullets being loaded into a chamber. "Oh, Mr. Harrison," she said, pulling out a leather portfolio that probably cost more than Brittany the receptionist made in a week. "I can assure you we're very serious." "Good, good," Harrison said, settling into his chair with the satisfaction of a man who believed he'd established dominance. "Because Terranova doesn't just accept any investor. We're selective about who we allow to be part of our journey." "Your journey?" Olivia repeated, opening her portfolio to reveal documents that would normally make executives salivate: financial projections, market analyses, investment strategies that had turned hundreds of millions into billions. But she didn't share them. Not yet. Instead, she looked up at Harrison and asked, "Tell me, Mr. Harrison, how selective were you when you took funding from Granite Ventures?" Harrison's eyebrows rose slightly. "That's public information." "It is," Olivia agreed. "Public information shows they invested $50 million in your Series B. What's not public information is that they've been trying to offload their stake for the past 18 months, rather desperately, in fact." Marcus Webb shifted uncomfortably in his seat. "I don't think that's accurate. 15% below their initial investment." Olivia continued, her voice smooth as silk over steel. "They've quietly approached 7 potential buyers. All have passed." "That's ridiculous," Harrison said, but there was a slight tremor in his voice, like a crack in a foundation. "Our relationships with our investors are excellent." "Are they?" Olivia pulled out a single sheet of paper, holding it up, but not sharing it. "Because I have here a rather interesting email from Granite's managing partner. Would you like me to read it? This is highly inappropriate." Harrison blustered, his face beginning to redden. "I don't know who you think you are." "I think I'm someone who was invited here to discuss a $2 billion investment," Olivia said calmly. "But perhaps I was mistaken. Perhaps Johnson Capital's money isn't good enough for Terranova. After all, I'm just staff, aren't I?" The word hung in the air like an accusation. Richard Stein cleared his throat. "Mr. Harrison, perhaps we should—" "Perhaps nothing." Harrison snapped his composure, cracking like ice under pressure. "I don't appreciate these tactics, Ms. Johnson, was it? If this is how your firm operates, with innuendo and threats." "Facts," Olivia corrected. "I operate with facts. For instance, it's a fact that your Q3 numbers were artificially inflated by counting pre-orders that have a 40% historical cancellation rate. It's a fact that your head of engineering and 3 of his top developers submitted resignations last week, though you haven't announced it yet. And it's a fact that without a significant capital injection in the next 60 days, you'll have to choose between R&D funding and marketing for your new product launch. The room had gone cold, despite the morning sun streaming through the windows. Harrison's face had progressed from red to an interesting shade of purple. Marcus Webb was frantically typing on his phone, probably trying to figure out how an outsider knew about the resignations that they'd been desperately trying to keep quiet. "How dare you?" Harrison started, but Olivia cut him off with a raised hand. "I dare because I do my homework, Mr. Harrison. The question is, do you do yours? Do you know who you invited to this meeting, or did you see a name and make assumptions?" "I know exactly who I invited," Harrison said, but the conviction in his voice was wavering. "A representative from Johnson Capital." "A representative," Olivia mused. "Tell me, when you Googled Johnson Capital, you did Google us, didn't you? What did you find?" Harrison didn't answer, but his silence was admission enough. The truth was, he hadn't Googled anything. His chief of staff had mentioned a potential major investor, he'd seen the number 2 billion, and he'd agreed to the meeting. The name Johnson was common enough, anonymous enough. He'd assumed. "You assumed," Olivia said, as if reading his mind, "that Johnson was probably some old white gentleman. Didn't you? Maybe from old money, the kind of person you'd shake hands with." "This is outrageous," Harrison said, standing abruptly. "This meeting is over. I don't care how much money you claim to represent. Claim." Olivia laughed, and it was not a pleasant sound. "Mr. Harrison, I don't claim to represent money. I am the money." She pulled out her phone, typed something quickly, and set it on the table. "But you're right about one thing. This meeting is over. At least this version of it is." Harrison was already moving toward the door when Marcus Webb's phone buzzed. Then Richard Stein's. Then the phones of the other two executives. They all looked at their screens simultaneously, and the color drained from their faces like water from a broken dam. "Leonard," Marcus said, his voice barely above a whisper, "you need to see this." "Not now." Harrison set his hand on the door handle. "Leonard," Marcus's voice cracked with urgency. "Johnson Capital just posted a public statement about their evaluation of Terra Nova. They're citing cultural concerns and leadership issues as reasons for pausing all investment discussions." Harrison froze. "They can't do that. We haven't even formally discussed anything." "They just did," Richard said, looking at his phone with the expression of someone watching a car accident in slow motion. "It's already been picked up by TechCrunch. The headline is, 'Not flattering.'" Olivia stood slowly gathering her documents with deliberate calm. "Gentlemen, this has been illuminating. Mr. Harrison, I'd offer to shake hands goodbye, but I wouldn't want to break your policy about staff." She moved toward the door, but Harrison blocked her path. Up close, she could see the panic beginning to bloom in his eyes as he realized the magnitude of his mistake. "Wait," he said, his voice different now, smaller, uncertain. "There's been a misunderstanding." "Has there?" Olivia asked, tilting her head slightly. "What kind of misunderstanding? The kind where you kept me waiting for 45 minutes in a staff room, the kind where you refused to shake my hand, or the kind where you haven't once asked for my actual position at Johnson Capital?" "Your position." Harrison's voice cracked slightly. Olivia smiled, and this time it was the smile of a predator who had cornered its prey. "You really didn't do your homework, did you? Tell me, Mr. Harrison, when your chief of staff set up this meeting, did they mention who would be attending from our side?" Harrison looked desperately at Marcus, who was scrolling frantically through his phone. "The email just said, O. Johnson, from Johnson Capital." "O. Johnson," Olivia repeated slowly, savoring each syllable. "And you never thought to ask what the O stood for?" The room was completely silent, except for the sound of Harrison's breathing, which had become noticeably labored. Olivia reached into her jacket pocket and pulled out a business card, not the standard paper kind, but metal with raised lettering that caught the light. She placed it on the table with a soft click that somehow sounded like a judge's gavel. Harrison picked it up with hands that trembled slightly. The text was simple, elegant, and absolutely devastating. Olivia Johnson, founder, CEO and managing partner, Johnson. Capital Partners assets under management, $50 billion. The card slipped from Harrison's fingers and fell to the table with a sound that seemed to echo in the sudden tomb-like silence of the conference room. 50 billion, not million, billion, with a B. Harrison's voice failed him. I'm the person who built Johnson Capital from a $10 million family trust into one of the largest private equity firms in North America. Olivia said, her voice calm, but carrying an undertone that could cut glass. I'm the person who orchestrated the second largest tech acquisition of 2023. I'm the person whose signature on a check can make or break a company's future, and I'm the person you just dismissed as staff. Marcus Webb had gone pale enough that he looked like he might need medical attention. Ms. Johnson, there's been a terrible mistake. Yes, Olivia agreed. There has been. The mistake was thinking that the color of my skin and my gender determined my worth in this room. The mistake was assuming that power only comes in packages that look like you. She picked up her briefcase, the click of its closing sounding like a door slamming on Terranova's future. Gentlemen, I came here prepared to invest $2 billion in your company. I had the term sheets drawn up. The due diligence was complete. The only thing left was this meeting, what I call the culture check. It's my way of seeing who I'm really getting into bed with, so to speak. Please, Harrison said, and the word seemed to physically pain him. Let's start over. Let me apologize. Apologize. Olivia laughed, but there was no humor in it. Mr. Harrison, you don't need to apologize to me. You need to apologize to every person who's walked through these doors and been judged by their appearance rather than their ability. You need to apologize to every brilliant mind you've overlooked because they didn't fit your narrow definition of what success looks like. She moved toward the door again, and this time Harrison stepped aside defeated. But Olivia paused at the threshold, turning back to face the room full of men who looked like they'd just watched their careers evaporate. Oh, and Mr. Harrison. That email from Granite Ventures. I mentioned. Their managing partner is David Chen. Brilliant man, MIT graduate, built 3 successful companies before moving into venture capital. You probably wouldn't shake his hand either, but he shook mine when we closed a $500 million deal last month. The door was almost closed behind her when she heard Harrison's desperate voice. What do we need to do to fix this? Olivia paused, considering. Then she opened the door just enough to be heard clearly. Mr. Harrison, you can't fix this with me, but you might want to start by fixing your corporate culture. Start by asking yourself why your company is hemorrhaging talent. Start by looking at your leadership team, 5 white men in a city that's one of the most diverse in the world. Start by examining why your first instinct when you saw me was to assume I was here to serve you coffee rather than offer you capital. I didn't, Harrison spluttered. Your receptionist assumed I was catering. Your intern looked terrified to escort me. You refused to shake my hand. Your entire system is designed to remind people who look like me that we don't belong here. Well, Mr. Harrison, you're right. I don't belong here. My money doesn't belong here. And after today, neither will a lot of other investors who pay attention to these things. She left then, her heels clicking down the hallway with the rhythm of a countdown timer on a bomb that had already exploded. Behind her, she could hear raised voices, panic accusations. Marcus Webb was already on his phone, probably trying to do damage control. Richard Stein was suggesting they call an emergency board meeting. The other 2 executives were apparently just sitting in shocked silence, watching their stock options evaporate in real time. Olivia didn't go back to the staff waiting room. Instead, she walked straight to the executive elevator, the one with the gold doors that Brittany had specifically told her not to use, and pressed the button. When it opened, she stepped inside and hit the button for the lobby. As the floors counted down, she pulled out her phone and opened a secure messaging app. Execute Contingency Plan Alpha, she typed to her chief of staff. Full disclosure to Bloomberg, Wall Street Journal, and TechCrunch. Emphasize cultural due diligence failure and leadership concerns. Have legal prepare the formal withdrawal letter. The response was immediate. Understood. Bloomberg already reaching out for comment based on the public statement. WSJ wants an exclusive. What should I tell them? Olivia thought for a moment as the elevator descended smoothly through the building that had just become a monument to Harrison's hubris. Tell Bloomberg no comment beyond the statement. Give WSJ the exclusive but embargo until market close. I want Harrison to spend the whole day watching his stock price and wondering how bad it's going to get. Savage. I love it. It's not savage, Olivia typed back. It's accountability. The elevator opened to the lobby where Brittany still sat at the reception desk, still clicking her acrylic nails against her keyboard. She looked up as Olivia passed, and her eyes widened with confusion. Oh, did you find the meeting okay? Someone should have... I found everything I needed to find, Olivia said, not slowing her pace. Tell me, Brittany, how long have you worked here? 2 years. And in those 2 years, how many black executives have you seen in the C-suite? Brittany's mouth opened and closed like a fish out of water. I mean, that's what I thought, Olivia said, pushing through the main doors into the November rain that had intensified during her time in the building. You might want to update your resume. This company is about to have a very bad quarter. She was halfway to her car, a subtle but expensive Tesla that waited in the visitor parking when her phone rang. The caller ID showed Harrison's direct line. She let it go to voicemail. It rang again immediately. This time she answered on speaker as she settled into the driver's seat. Ms. Johnson. Harrison's voice was different now, desperate, hollow, the voice of a man watching his empire crumble. Please, we need to talk. We did talk, Mr. Harrison. You made your position very clear. You don't shake hands with staff. I didn't mean... What didn't you mean? Olivia asked, starting the car. Be specific. Which part didn't you mean? The part where you assumed I was beneath you? The part where you dismissed me without knowing anything about me beyond my appearance? Or the part where you verbalized what your actions had already said? All of it, Harrison said quickly. None of it. I mean, I'm sorry. I'm very sorry. This is all a misunderstanding. Mr. Harrison, let me explain something to you, Olivia said, pulling out of the parking space. When I walked into your building this morning, I controlled $50 billion in assets. I had the power to transform Terranova from a struggling mid-tier tech company into an industry leader. I had 3 pension funds and 2 sovereign wealth funds ready to co-invest based on my recommendation alone. That was this morning. And now, Harrison's voice was barely a whisper. Now I'm going to make sure every investor in Silicon Valley knows exactly what kind of man you are and what kind of company you run. Not because you insulted me. I've been insulted by better men than you, but because you revealed something fundamental about Terranova's culture. A company that judges people by their skin color rather than their capabilities is a company that will always underperform. It's not just morally bankrupt, it's financially stupid. Please, Harrison said again, and she could hear others in the background, probably the board members who were just learning about the disaster. There has to be something we can do. Olivia was quiet for a moment, letting him marinate in his desperation. Then she said, Mr. Harrison, in about 6 hours, the Wall Street Journal is going to publish an exclusive about why Johnson Capital walked away from Terranova. In that article, I'm going to be very specific about the treatment I received. I'm going to mention the 45-minute wait in the staff room. I'm going to mention your refusal to shake hands. And I'm going to pose a simple question. If this is how Terranova treats a potential investor with $50 billion under management, how does it treat employees who don't have that power? You can't. I can and I will. Your stock is going to tank, Mr. Harrison. Your board is going to call for your head. Your investors are going to run for the exits. And you know what the really ironic part is? This could have all been avoided if you'd just shaken my hand." She hung up then, tossing the phone onto the passenger seat as she navigated through San Francisco traffic. The rain had turned into a proper storm, now the kind that sent tourists running for cover and reminded locals why they paid astronomical rents for the privilege of living here. Her phone buzzed with messages, her team confirming the media strategy, reporters requesting comments, and surprisingly, a text from David Chen at Granite Ventures. "Heard what happened at Terranova. Not surprised. Want to grab coffee and discuss their impending fire sale." But there was one message that made her pull over to read properly. It was from someone she didn't recognize. A young woman named Aisha Patel. "Ms. Johnson, you don't know me, but I work at Terranova in engineering. I just heard what happened in the executive conference room. I've been here 3 years, passed over for promotion 4 times, despite outperforming my metrics. They always say I need more executive presence or cultural fit. Thank you for saying what needed to be said. There are dozens of us here, brilliant people whose talents are wasted because we don't look like the leadership team. Whatever happens next, thank you for showing them that their bigotry has consequences." Olivia stared at the message for a long moment, feeling something shift in her chest. She'd walked into Terranova, prepared to make a business decision. She was walking away from it with something more, a reminder of why she'd built Johnson Capital in the first place. She typed back, "Keep your head up, and your resume updated. Change is coming. And when it does, send me your information." Johnson Capital is always looking for brilliant people who've been overlooked by stupid companies. Then she put the car back in drive and headed toward her office in the financial district. She had a media storm to orchestrate, a company to destroy, and most importantly, a message to send to every boardroom in America. The Old Boys Club was closed for renovation, and Olivia Johnson was holding the wrecking ball. As she drove through the storm-darkened streets of San Francisco, her phone continued to buzz with the opening salvos of what would become known in business school case studies as the handshake heard round the valley. But Olivia didn't answer any of them. Not yet. First, she had a board meeting of her own to attend, where she would explain to her partners why walking away from $2 billion was the best investment decision she'd ever make. The rain intensified as she pulled into the underground parking of the Johnson Capital building, each drop that hit her windshield like another nail in Terranova's coffin. Somewhere across the city, Leonard Harrison was learning the hard way that respect wasn't something you could buy, sell, or leverage. It was something you earned. Or in his case, something you lost with 6 simple words: "I don't shake hands with staff." The Johnson Capital building stood like a beacon of black glass and steel in San Francisco's financial district, its top floors disappearing into the low-hanging storm clouds. By the time Olivia reached the executive conference room on the 40th floor, her phone had logged 37 missed calls from Terranova's board members, each one more desperate than the last. She ignored them all. "They're panicking," Marcus Chen, her chief investment officer, said as she entered. He was standing at the floor-to-ceiling windows watching the city blur beneath sheets of rain. Terranova's stock is down 12% in pre-market trading, and that's just on rumors. "Good," Olivia said, setting her briefcase on the polished mahogany table. Around it sat her core team, 5 individuals who'd helped her build Johnson Capital from a modest family trust into a financial powerhouse. Unlike Harrison's monochrome assembly, her leadership team looked like America actually looked Marcus, with his Taiwanese heritage. Sarah Williams, whose grandfather had marched with King James Rodriguez, whose parents had fled Cuba, and Priya Sharma, whose brilliance had been forged at IIT before Harvard poached her. "The Wall Street Journal wants to know if you'll consider a video interview," Sarah said, sliding a tablet across the table. "They're calling it the most expensive handshake never made." Olivia almost smiled at that. "Tell them print only. I want people to read every word, not get distracted by optics." Speaking of optics, James pulled up a holographic display from the table's embedded projector. Someone leaked video from Terranova's lobby. Shows you waiting while the receptionist made that call. The audio is damaging. The video played in ghostly blue light above the table. Even from the security camera's angle, you could see the receptionist's body language, the dismissive wave of her hand. And though the audio was muffled, the words, "She's black," came through clear enough. "How did this leak?" Olivia asked. Anonymous source sent it to TechCrunch about 20 minutes ago. Priya said, her fingers flying across her laptop keyboard. But here's where it gets interesting. I've been monitoring Terranova's internal communications completely legally through public channels. She added quickly. Their Glassdoor reviews are lighting up. Employees are coming forward with their own stories. It's an avalanche. Marcus turned from the window. Olivia Harrison's called an emergency board meeting for noon. Our sources say he's going to try to spin this as a misunderstanding, maybe even suggest you deliberately entrapped him. Let him try, Olivia said, but her mind was already 3 moves ahead. Sarah, I want you to reach out to every major diversity and inclusion organization in tech. Tell them Johnson Capital is prepared to fund a comprehensive study on discrimination in venture capital. $50 million commitment. Sarah's eyes widened. That's a statement, Olivia corrected. James, get me a list of every woman and minority founder that Terranova passed on in the last 5 years. Cross-reference it with companies that went on to succeed with other funding. Already on it, James said, pulling up another display. You're going to love this. Remember Quantum Leap, the quantum computing startup founded by Dr. Amara Okafor, the Nigerian physicist from MIT. That's the one. Terranova passed on her Series A, called her technology too speculative and her leadership unproven. She just signed a $300 million contract with the Defense Department. Olivia felt something cold and satisfying settle in her chest. Get her on the phone. Tell her Johnson Capital wants to lead her Series B. The room's energy shifted electric with possibility. This was what she'd built, not just an investment firm, but a machine for correcting market failures caused by prejudice. Every successful investment in an overlooked founder was proof that the old guard's bigotry wasn't just morally wrong, it was financially stupid. Her phone buzzed. Another call from Harrison. This time, she recognized the number calling alongside his Lawrence Whitman, chairman of Terranova's board. She gestured for quiet and answered on speaker. Ms. Johnson. Whitman's voice was carefully modulated, a lawyer's voice. I'm calling with Mr. Harrison to address this morning's unfortunate incident. Unfortunate, Olivia repeated. That's an interesting choice of words, Mr. Whitman. What Leonard meant to say, Whitman began, but Harrison's voice cut through rough with desperation. I meant to say, I'm sorry. I'm deeply, deeply sorry. I made assumptions, terrible assumptions, and Mr. Harrison. Olivia interrupted, her voice sharp enough to cut glass. Are you sorry for what you did, or sorry for the consequences? Silence. Then Whitman tried again. Ms. Johnson, surely we can find a path forward that benefits everyone. Terranova is prepared to make significant changes. Such as, well? Whitman cleared his throat. We're prepared to appoint a chief diversity officer, implement bias training. Olivia laughed, and everyone in her conference room winced. It wasn't a pleasant sound. Mr. Whitman, you want to put a bandage on a severed artery. Your company's problem isn't lack of training. It's lack of leadership. What exactly are you suggesting? Harrison's voice cracked. I'm not suggesting anything. I'm simply observing that a fish rots from the head down. Another silence, longer this time. Then Whitman spoke, his words careful as footsteps through a minefield. The board would be willing to consider leadership changes if that would reopen discussions about Johnson Capital's investment. Olivia's team exchanged glances. Marcus mouthed, "Holy shit." Harrison was being thrown under the bus in real time, and everyone could hear it happening. Leonard, what are you? Harrison started, but Whitman cut him off. Leonard, perhaps it would be best if you let me handle this. You're throwing me to the wolves." Harrison's composure finally shattered completely. 20 years I've built this company, and you're 20 years of systematically excluding talent based on race and gender, Olivia said coldly. 20 years of creating a culture where brilliance is ignored if it doesn't come in the right package. Mr. Whitman, even if you fire Harrison today, Terranova's rot goes deeper than one man. Then what do you want? Whitman asked. Olivia stood pacing to the window where Marcus had been standing. The city below was a blur of rain and motion, but she could see Terranova's building in the distance, a tower built on foundations of sand. "I want nothing from you," she said finally. "Johnson Capital has no interest in investing in Terranova under any leadership. But I'll tell you what's going to happen. In 4 hours, the Wall Street Journal article goes live. By market close, your stock will be down 30% minimum. By end of week, you'll have 3 shareholder lawsuits. Your best engineers, the ones who've been marginalized, overlooked, underpaid. They're updating their resumes right now. Your competitors are already preparing offers for them. You're destroying us out of spite," Harrison accused. "No, Mr. Harrison. I'm revealing what you always were. I'm just pulling back the curtain." She hung up and turned to her team. "Priya, how many employees at Terranova match our diversity recruitment targets?" "Based on LinkedIn data. At least 40 in engineering alone, another dozen in product development." "Prepare offers, senior positions, 20% salary increase, full relocation packages. Marcus, I want you to identify 3 companies in Terranova's space that deserve investment. Companies with diverse leadership teams." "Already have a list." Marcus grinned. "Been waiting for an opportunity to deploy capital there." Sarah's phone chimed. She read the message and her eyebrows shot up. "Olivia, you're not going to believe this. Sequoia Capital just put out a statement. They're reassessing their investment in Terranova in light of concerning cultural revelations." "And so it begins," James muttered. But Olivia wasn't satisfied with just watching Terranova burn. She pulled out her phone and scrolled to Aisha Patel's message from earlier. The young engineer who'd thanked her. She forwarded it to Priya. "Find her. Offer her double whatever she's making. Actually find every woman and minority engineer at Terranova who's been passed over for promotion in the last 2 years. Offer them all positions." "That could be hundreds of people," Priya said. "Then we'd better get started." The conference room door opened, and Olivia's assistant Michael entered with an expression of barely contained excitement. "Ms. Johnson, you need to see this." He touched the conference table, and a new display materialized, a live feed from CNBC. "Extraordinary development in the Terranova story," the anchor was saying. "We're now learning that Johnson Capital's Olivia Johnson personally experienced discriminatory treatment during what was supposed to be a $2 billion investment discussion. Sources inside Terranova are painting a picture of systematic discrimination that goes back years." The screen split to show a young black woman in a video call with the network. The caption identified her as former Terranova employee. "I worked there for 3 years," she was saying. "I had a master's from Stanford, perfect performance reviews, but I watched less qualified men get promoted over me repeatedly. When I complained to HR, I was told I needed to be patient and earn trust. Meanwhile, a white male colleague who started 6 months after me is now a department head." The screen split again, another former employee, this time an Asian man. They had what they called culture fit meetings, where they'd essentially discuss whether someone looked like leadership material. It was never explicit, but everyone knew what culture fit meant. "Turn it off," Olivia said quietly. She'd won, but watching the human cost of Terranova's culture laid bare gave her no satisfaction. These were careers, derailed dreams, deferred brilliance, wasted. Her phone rang. She didn't recognize the number, but something made her answer. "Ms. Johnson." The voice was female, older, carefully controlled. "This is Margaret Harrison, Leonard's wife." The room went silent. Olivia gestured for her team to stay quiet. "Mrs. Harrison, this is unexpected." "I imagine it is." There was a pause, the sound of careful breathing. "I'm calling because I need you to know something. I've been telling Leonard for years that this would happen. I've watched him dismiss brilliant people, watched him build this boys' club, watched him become someone I don't recognize. Why are you telling me this? Because he's my husband, and I love him, but he's also wrong, has been wrong. And maybe this is what needed to happen. Maybe being held accountable is the only way he'll change." Olivia sat down slowly. This wasn't the conversation she'd expected. "Mrs. Harrison, I have a daughter," Margaret continued. "Brilliant girl, MBA from Wharton, top of her class. She wanted to work at Terranova, wanted to make her father proud. He told her to try marketing instead of engineering because it would be more suitable. She works for Google now in their AI division, makes twice what she would have at Terranova." "I'm sorry," Olivia said, and meant it. "Don't be. You did what I couldn't do. You held up a mirror. Leonard's calling you a villain, but you're not. You're just someone who refused to play by rules that should never have existed." The line went dead. Olivia stared at her phone for a moment, processing this unexpected glimpse behind Terranova's curtain. "That was interesting," Marcus said softly. "His own wife?" Sarah shook her head. That's something." Michael cleared his throat. "Ms. Johnson, there's more. The California Attorney General's office just announced they're opening an investigation into discriminatory practices in tech companies, specifically mentioning Terranova as a catalyst." The dominoes were falling faster now, each one triggering the next in a cascade that would reshape Silicon Valley's landscape. But Olivia's mind was already moving beyond Terranova, beyond Harrison's downfall. "Sarah set up a conference call with the heads of the 5 largest pension funds we work with. James, I want a proposal on my desk by end of day for a new investment vehicle, one that specifically targets companies with diverse leadership. Priya, start identifying every company in our portfolio that needs a culture audit." "You're turning this into something bigger," Marcus observed. "I'm turning this into something necessary," Olivia corrected. Harrison thought he was rejecting one investor. He actually lit a fuse. The question now is whether we let it burn out or use it to light 1,000 more. Her phone buzzed with a text from David Chen at Granite Ventures. "3 other VCs want to meet with you. They want to discuss a coalition. Interested?" She showed the message to her team. "What do you think?" "I think," Priya said slowly, "that Harrison refusing to shake your hand might be the most expensive gesture in corporate history." The storm outside was beginning to clear, rays of sunlight breaking through the clouds in dramatic shafts that lit up the city like spotlights on a stage. Olivia stood at the window, watching Terranova's building in the distance. In a few hours, the Wall Street Journal article would go live. By tomorrow, Harrison would probably be clearing out his office. Within a week, Terranova would be in full crisis mode. But that wasn't the victory. The victory was in her inbox, filling with messages from overlooked founders, marginalized engineers, dismissed dreamers who finally saw proof that the system could be challenged. Each message was a potential investment, a possible unicorn that the old guard would have ignored. "Olivia," Michael said, returning to the room with an unusual expression. "There's someone here to see you. No appointment, but he says it's urgent. Richard Stein from Terranova." The room tensed. Stein, Harrison's head of strategic development, one of the men who'd sat silent while Harrison insulted her. "Send him in," Olivia said, curious despite herself. Stein entered looking like he'd aged 5 years in as many hours. His expensive suit was rumpled, his tie askew, and there was a desperation in his eyes that Olivia recognized the look of a man watching his life's work crumble. "Ms. Johnson," he began, then stopped, seeming to gather himself. "I need to say something. You have 2 minutes." "I should have said something. When Leonard refused to shake your hand when he said what he said. I should have spoken up. I didn't. I was a coward." "Yes," Olivia agreed simply. You were. Stein flinched but continued. I have a daughter, 16 years old, wants to be an engineer. Brilliant kid already coding at a level that amazes me. And I sat in that room and let Leonard treat you that way, knowing that someday some other man might treat my daughter the same way. I failed her. I failed you. I failed everyone who deserved better from me. What do you want, Mr. Stein? Absolution. I'm not in that business. No, Stein said quickly. I want to help. I'm resigning from Terranova, effective immediately. But first, I'm going to the board with everything. Every discriminatory hiring decision, every passed-over promotion, every time Leonard or the leadership team made choices based on bias rather than merit. I have documents, emails, recordings from meetings where these discussions happened. The room was electric with tension. This was an insider-turning whistleblower offering ammunition that could destroy not just Harrison, but the entire leadership structure. Why? Olivia asked. Because my daughter is watching. Because she's going to enter this industry in a few years, and I want it to be better for her. Because sitting silent makes me complicit. He pulled a USB drive from his pocket and set it on the table. Everything's on there. Use it however you think best. He turned to leave, then paused at the door. For what it's worth, Johnson Capital rejecting us isn't our loss. It's just the universe correcting our stupidity. After he left, the team sat in stunned silence. Marcus picked up the USB drive, turning it over in his fingers like it might explode. This is evidence, Olivia said. Michael, get our legal team up here. We need to verify everything on that drive, then decide how to use it responsibly. Responsibly? James asked. They didn't play responsibly. Which is exactly why we have to, Olivia replied. We're not just winning a fight, we're setting a precedent. The next 2 hours were a blur of activity. The USB drive contained exactly what Stein had promised, a comprehensive record of systematic discrimination spanning years. Email chains where qualified candidates were dismissed with coded language. Meeting recordings where Harrison explicitly stated preferences for people who look like leaders and candidates who fit our image. The most damaging piece was a video from a leadership retreat 6 months earlier. Harrison, slightly drunk on expensive whiskey, laying out his vision for Terranova's future, a vision that explicitly excluded anyone who didn't match his narrow definition of excellence. We could release this, Sarah said quietly. It would end him. It would, Olivia agreed. But that's not the goal. The goal is change. Michael set up a meeting with the California Attorney General's office. We'll turn this over to them. Let justice follow proper channels. That's very measured of you, Marcus observed. I'm not interested in revenge, Olivia said. I'm interested in revolution. Her phone rang. The caller ID showed something unexpected, the White House switchboard. Ms. Johnson. The voice was professional, efficient. Please hold for the President's Chief of Staff. Olivia gestured frantically for silence. A moment later, another voice came on the line. Ms. Johnson, this is Catherine Davies, Chief of Staff to the President. We've been following the Terranova situation with interest. The President would like to discuss your experience and potentially highlight it in next week's address on economic equality and corporate responsibility. Would you be available for a call this afternoon? Olivia's team was staring at her with expressions ranging from shock to awe. She kept her voice steady. I would be honored. Excellent. We'll call at 3 p.m. Pacific. And Ms. Johnson. Off the record, what you did today needed doing. Thank you for having the courage to do it. The line went dead. For a moment, nobody spoke. Then Priya whispered, The White House. The actual White House. This is bigger than Terranova now, Marcus said. This is national. Olivia's phone was buzzing constantly now. Reporters, investors, other CEOs, all wanting to understand what had happened, what it meant, what came next. But one message stood out, not because of who sent it, but because of its simplicity. It was from Aisha Patel, the Terranova engineer who'd first reached out, watching the news, watching everything unfold. 23 of us just submitted our resignations together. We're calling ourselves the Handshake 23. Thank you for showing us we had power." Olivia read the message aloud to her team. "That," she said, "is why this matters. Not the stock price, not the headlines, not even the White House call. 23 people just chose their dignity over their paychecks. That's the revolution." "Speaking of stock prices," James said, pulling up a display, "Terra Nova is down 18% and falling. Trading might be halted if it drops much more." "Let it fall," Olivia said. "Let everyone see what happens when leadership fails to lead, when culture becomes toxic, when brilliance is rejected, because it comes in the wrong package." The Wall Street Journal article wouldn't go live for another 2 hours, but the story was already writing itself in real time. A company's downfall, a movement's birth, and at the center of it all, 6 words that changed everything. "I don't shake hands with staff." But as Olivia stood there, surrounded by her team, watching the city reshape itself in real time, she knew the real story wasn't about Harrison's insult or Terra Nova's collapse. It was about what came next. About the companies that would be built by people who'd been told they didn't belong. About the innovations that would emerge from minds that had been dismissed. About the future that would be created by those who refused to accept the past. Her phone rang again. This time, it was someone she'd been expecting: Jennifer Wu, CEO of Phoenix Technologies, Terra Nova's biggest competitor. "Olivia." Jennifer's voice was warm, familiar. They'd done deals before. "I'm calling for 2 reasons. First, to say it's about time someone called out Harrison's bullshit. Second, to tell you that I'm about to make offers to every single one of those Handshake 23 engineers." "Good," Olivia said. "They deserve better. Also, I want Johnson Capital to lead our next funding round. 100 million minimum. You interested? Send me the terms, but Jennifer, this isn't charity. I'll evaluate Phoenix just as rigorously as any other investment." "I wouldn't expect anything less. Oh, and Olivia, we have a board meeting next week. I'm proposing a new company policy. Any executive who demonstrates discriminatory behavior is terminated immediately. No severance, no negotiation. I'm calling it the Johnson Clause." After she hung up, Olivia realized that Harrison's insult had created something he never could have imagined: a rallying cry, a moment of clarity, a line in the sand that corporate America would have to acknowledge. The storm outside had passed completely now, leaving the city washed clean and gleaming in the afternoon sun. Somewhere in Terra Nova's building, Harrison was probably in crisis meetings, trying to salvage something from the wreckage of his arrogance. But that was yesterday's story. Tomorrow's story was being written by the Handshake 23, by Jennifer Wu's Johnson Clause, by every company that would think twice before dismissing someone based on appearance rather than ability. Olivia picked up the USB drive Stein had left, weighing it in her hand. Evidence of years of discrimination, powerful enough to destroy careers and trigger lawsuits. But also heavy with the weight of every opportunity lost, every dream deferred, every brilliant mind turned away. "Priya," she said suddenly, "I want you to analyze the data on that drive. Not for legal action, but for patterns. I want to know exactly how much value Terra Nova lost by discriminating. Every rejected candidate who went on to success elsewhere, every marginalized employee who underperformed because they knew they'd never advance. Put a dollar figure on bigotry." That's brilliant," Marcus said. "Turn it into a business case. Show that discrimination isn't just wrong, it's expensive." "Exactly. We're going to create a report that every board member in America will have to read. The real cost of corporate bias measured in lost innovation, reduced productivity, and missed opportunities." Sarah's phone chimed. She read the message and smiled. The Wall Street Journal wants to expand the article. They're turning it into a series. The Handshake Effect: How One Moment of Bias Triggered a Corporate Revolution. "Tell them yes," Olivia said. "Full access, complete transparency. Let them document everything." As her team dispersed to handle the tsunami of activity Harrison's insult had triggered, Olivia remained at the window. The city below was carrying on with its usual chaos, unaware that the rules of the game had just changed. But in boardrooms across the country, executives were having urgent conversations about diversity policies. HR departments were scheduling emergency bias training. CEOs were looking at their leadership teams and realizing how monochrome they were, all because Leonard Harrison couldn't bring himself to shake a black woman's hand. The president's call came exactly at 3 p.m., just as Terranova's stock price hit its lowest point of the day, triggering an automatic trading halt. Olivia took the call in her private office, while her team watched the market chaos unfold on multiple screens in the conference room. Ms. Johnson. President Catherine Chen's voice was warm, but commanding the voice of a woman who'd broken her own share of barriers. I wanted to speak with you personally about what happened today. Not as president, but as someone who sat in rooms where she was the only woman, the only Asian American, the only one who didn't fit the mold. Madam President, Olivia began, but Chen interrupted gently. Please, for this conversation, just Catherine. I read the preliminary report my staff prepared. Harrison actually said those words, I don't shake hands with staff. He did, clearly, proudly, with 4 other executives watching. There was a pause, then a soft exhale. 20 years ago, when I was a junior senator, I attended a finance committee meeting where the chairman introduced every male member by their titles and accomplishments, then introduced me as the lovely lady from California. I smiled, said nothing, and spent the next decade making sure he never chaired another committee. Did he ever apologize? Oh, thoroughly, publicly, repeatedly. After he lost his chairmanship, his primary committee positions, and eventually his seat. Funny how apologies come so easily when consequences arrive. Olivia found herself genuinely smiling for the first time all day. Actions and consequences. It's a simple concept that seems to escape certain people. Indeed. Which brings me to why I'm calling. Next week, I'm signing an executive order regarding federal contracting requirements. Companies that want government contracts will need to demonstrate measurable diversity metrics not just in hiring, but in leadership positions. I'd like you to be there for the signing. Your story, what you did today. It's the perfect example of why this is necessary. I'm honored, but Madam President Catherine, I should warn you that Harrison and his allies are already trying to spin this as an attack on business, as reverse discrimination. The president laughed, a sound sharp enough to cut glass. Let them try. My communications team has been documenting discrimination lawsuits against major corporations for the past year. The numbers are staggering. The lost productivity, the settlement costs, the brain drain. It's costing the American economy hundreds of billions annually. You didn't attack business, Ms. Johnson. You demonstrated that discrimination is bad for business. After the call ended, Olivia returned to the conference room to find her team in a state of controlled chaos. Marcus had 3 phones going simultaneously. Sarah was conducting an impromptu press conference via video call, and Priya was coordinating with what appeared to be dozens of engineers fleeing Terranova. Update, Marcus said without looking up. Terranova's board just announced an emergency meeting for tonight. Word is they're going to demand Harrison's immediate resignation. Also, James added, that coalition David Chen mentioned, it's real. 7 venture capital firms combined assets of $200 billion. They want to meet tomorrow to discuss establishing new investment standards industry-wide. Michael burst through the door, his usually composed demeanor completely shattered. Ms. Johnson, you need to see this. Harrison just went on CNBC. It's not good. The screen flickered to life, showing Harrison looking haggard and desperate, sitting across from a clearly uncomfortable anchor. His perfect silver hair was disheveled, his red power tie askew, and his eyes had the wild look of a cornered animal. This is a witch hunt, Harrison was saying, his voice cracking. I built Terranova from nothing, created thousands of jobs, and now I'm being crucified for a simple misunderstanding. Olivia Johnson came into my office with an agenda. She trapped me. Mr. Harrison, The anchor interrupted. Are you denying that you refused to shake Ms. Johnson's hand? That you said, and I quote, "I don't shake hands with staff." That's taken out of context. What context would make that acceptable? Harrison's mouth opened and closed like a fish gasping for air. She was aggressive, confrontational. She didn't respect the culture we've built at Terranova. The culture, the anchor repeated slowly. Mr. Harrison, we've received over 40 testimonials from current and former Terranova employees describing systematic discrimination. How do you respond? Lies. Harrison spat. Disgruntled employees looking for a payday. This is what happens when you let political correctness run amok. Pretty soon you can't run a business without someone crying discrimination. Olivia watched with a mixture of fascination and disgust as Harrison proceeded to dig his hole deeper with every word. He blamed everyone but himself, the media, the woke mob, the board that was caving to pressure, and especially Olivia, whom he painted as a calculating manipulator who'd orchestrated his downfall for publicity. Turn it off, she said quietly. He's done. But Marcus held up a hand. Wait. Look. On screen, the anchor was holding up a tablet. Mr. Harrison, we've just received a statement from your wife, Margaret Harrison. Would you like me to read it? The color drained from Harrison's face so fast that Olivia worried he might faint on live television. My wife, what? What statement? Quote, I can no longer remain silent while my husband destroys not only his legacy, but the lives of countless talented individuals who deserved better. Leonard Harrison is a man who told his own daughter she wasn't suited for engineering because of her gender. The culture at Terranova reflects his personal beliefs. Beliefs I've watched poison our family for years. I support Ms. Johnson and every person who has the courage to stand against discrimination, even when it costs them everything. End quote. Harrison stood abruptly, yanking off his microphone. This interview is over. But the camera kept rolling, catching him stumbling off the set, his carefully constructed world collapsing in real time. The anchor turned back to the camera with the shell-shocked expression of someone who'd just witnessed a public execution. That was Leonard Harrison, CEO of Terranova Technologies, responding to allegations of discrimination. We'll have more on this developing story as it unfolds. The conference room was silent for a long moment. Then Priya said softly, his own wife, on live television. That's consequences, Olivia finished. The real kind. The kind that follow you home. Her phone buzzed with a text from Margaret Harrison. I've filed for divorce. My daughter and I are starting a nonprofit to support women in STEM. Would Johnson Capital consider being a founding sponsor? Olivia showed the message to her team. Draft a commitment for $10 million. She told Sarah. Make it 20 if they partner with existing organizations rather than duplicating efforts. You're funding his ex-wife's nonprofit. Marcus asked, a note of admiration in his voice. I'm funding the future. The fact that it's poetic justice is just a bonus. The afternoon wore on in a blur of strategic decisions and rapid responses. The Handshake 23 had grown to the Handshake 47 as more Terranova employees resigned in solidarity. 3 more tech companies announced emergency diversity audits. The Wall Street Journal's website crashed twice from traffic to their exclusive article. At 4:47 p.m., just as the market was about to close, Terranova's board released a statement. Effective immediately, Leonard Harrison has been terminated as CEO of Terranova Technologies. The board apologizes unreservedly for the incident involving Ms. Olivia Johnson and Johnson Capital Partners. We are committed to investigating all allegations of discrimination and taking corrective action. Too little too late, James muttered, but Olivia was reading between the lines. They're scared, she said. This isn't contrition, it's damage control. They're trying to contain the fire before it burns down the whole building. Is it working? Sarah asked. Marcus pulled up the final trading numbers. Stocks down 31%. Worst single-day drop in the company's history. Market cap lost $4.2 billion. The most expensive handshake never made, Priya said, shaking her head. You could almost feel sorry for them if they hadn't brought it entirely on themselves. A knock at the door interrupted them. Michael entered with an expression of barely contained excitement. Ms. Johnson, there are 3 news vans outside. Also, someone from the governor's office called. He wants to discuss appointing you to the California Technology and Innovation Commission. Tell the news vans no comment beyond our official statement. Tell the governor's office I'll consider it if the commission has actual power to effect change, not just make recommendations. Also, Michael continued, you have visitors. 3 women who say they have an appointment, but I don't have them on the calendar. Diane Chen, Amara Okafor, and Jennifer Martinez. Olivia's eyes widened slightly. Send them up immediately. Who are they? Marcus asked. Diane Chen runs the largest woman-owned construction firm in California. Amara Okafor is the quantum computing genius Terranova rejected. Jennifer Martinez built a fintech unicorn after every major VC turned her down. Separately, they're success stories. Together. The 3 women entered like a force of nature. Diane Chen, 60-something with silver hair and an aura of unshakable authority. Amara Okafor, brilliant and fierce, with an accent that carried hints of Lagos and London. Jennifer Martinez, younger than the others, but with eyes that had seen every variety of corporate bullshit and remained unimpressed. Olivia, Diane said without preamble. We've been watching today's events with great interest. We've been discussing it in our group chat since this morning, Jennifer added. The one we call The Rejected, where we share stories of all the times we were dismissed, overlooked, or insulted by men like Harrison. There are 300 of us in that chat, Amara said, her voice carrying the precision of someone who measured words like quantum states. Combined, our companies are worth approximately $70 billion, all built without the help of the old boys club. And now, Diane continued, we want to formalize something. A fund, an alliance, call it what you want. We pool resources, share intelligence, and systematically fund every brilliant person the Harrisons of the world reject. Olivia felt something electric run through her spine. You're talking about restructuring the entire venture capital ecosystem. We're talking about replacing it, Jennifer corrected. The old system is broken. It funds pattern matching instead of innovation. It's time for something new. How much capital are we discussing? Marcus asked, his financial mind already spinning. To start, Diane smiled. 50 billion. But that's just the founding members. We've had preliminary discussions with pension funds, sovereign wealth funds, even some family offices tired of the status quo. Within a year, we could be managing 200 billion. A shadow Silicon Valley, Priya breathed. Operating parallel to, but separate from the traditional ecosystem. Not shadow, Amara corrected. Alternative. Better. Based on merit, rather than melanin, on capability, rather than connections. Sarah's phone had been buzzing constantly, but she suddenly gasped. Oh my God! Olivia, check your phone. Check it now. Olivia pulled out her phone to find hundreds of notifications. The top one made her freeze. Forbes Olivia Johnson named most powerful woman in finance. But it was the second notification that made her sink into her chair. Breaking Terranova board member leaks. Recording of executive session, Harrison heard, using racial slurs. Play it, she said quietly. The recording was grainy but unmistakable. Harrison's voice raised in anger during what was clearly a board meeting from earlier that day. I don't care what that uppity bee thinks she can do to us. Johnson Capital is nothing. She's nothing. Just another affirmative action success story trying to shake down real businesses. The slurs got worse from there. Every stereotype, every racist assumption, every piece of bigotry Harrison had been hiding behind his expensive suits and polished presentations spilled out in a torrent of hate. Who leaked this? Marcus asked, stunned. Sarah was already checking her sources. Richard Stein. He's burning it all down. There's more coming, apparently. Years of recordings. He was wearing a wire to board meetings, James asked incredulously. He was covering his ass, Olivia said, understanding immediately. He knew what Harrison was, knew it would eventually explode, and he wanted evidence that he'd tried to stop it. Tried? Diane Chen scoffed. Sitting silent while bigotry flourishes isn't trying. It's complicity. But useful complicity, Amara observed clinically. His cowardice then serves justice now. Olivia's phone rang. The caller ID showed Lawrence Whitman Turturanova's board chair. She put it on speaker. Ms. Johnson. Whitman's voice was different now, broken, desperate. I assume you've heard the recording. All of America has heard it by now, Mr. Whitman. We didn't know. The board didn't know that he held these views. Bullshit, Jennifer Martinez said loudly enough for Whitman to hear. You knew exactly who he was. You just didn't care until it affected your stock price. Who is that? Whitman asked. The future, Olivia replied. Mr. Whitman, why are you really calling? There was a long pause. The board is meeting in an hour. We're going to clean house, complete leadership change, new CEO, new culture, everything. We want to know if that would be enough for Johnson Capital to reconsider. No. No, just no. Mr. Whitman, you can't spray Febreze on a sewage plant and call it clean. Turturanova's problems go deeper than leadership. They're embedded in every policy, every process, every assumption about what excellence looks like. You want my advice? Sell the company. Let someone else rebuild from the foundation up. Sell to whom? Olivia looked at the three women in her office, saw the same thought reflected in their eyes. That's not my problem to solve. Goodbye, Mr. Whitman. She hung up and turned to her visitors. Ladies, how would you feel about acquiring Turturanova hostile takeover, complete restructuring? Turn it into a case study for inclusive innovation. Diane Chen's smile was sharp enough to cut diamond. I thought you'd never ask. The rest of the day blurred into a symphony of strategic planning. While Harrison's career imploded on every news channel, while Turturanova's board scrambled for damage control, while the Handshake 47 grew to the Handshake 73. Olivia and her new alliance laid the groundwork for something unprecedented. By 7 p.m., when the sun was setting over San Francisco Bay in a blaze of orange and gold, the framework was in place. The alliance, as they were calling it for now, would launch with founding capital of $50 billion. They would target companies with diverse leadership, revolutionary ideas, and the kind of talent that traditional VCs overlooked. And their first major action would be the hostile takeover of Turturanova, transforming it from a symbol of corporate bigotry into a beacon of inclusive innovation. We need a better name than the Alliance, Jennifer said, pouring scotch from Olivia's private reserve. The Johnson Coalition, Sarah suggested. God, no, Olivia said immediately. This isn't about me. It was never about me. The Phoenix Fund, Amara suggested. Rising from the ashes of the old system. Too mythological, Diane countered. We need something that says what we are. Direct, powerful, undeniable. They debated for another hour while the city lights began to twinkle below each light, representing dreams and ambitions and possibilities. Finally, it was Marcus who suggested the perfect name. Equity, he said simply. Not just financial equity, but equity in opportunity and access in recognition. Equity Partners. Equity Partners. Olivia tested the words, feeling their weight and power. I like it. Her phone buzzed with one final message of the day, this one from an unexpected source. Leonard Harrison himself, texting from what was probably the ruins of his life. You destroyed everything I built. Olivia considered not responding, then typed back. No, Mr. Harrison. You destroyed everything you built. I just held up the mirror. She deleted his number, blocked it, and turned back to her new partners. Tomorrow, they would announce Equity Partners to the world. Tomorrow, they would begin the hostile takeover of Turturanova. Tomorrow they would start rebuilding the technology industry in an image that actually looked like America. But tonight, as she stood in her office, surrounded by brilliant women who'd been told they weren't good enough watching a bigot's empire crumble on live television, Olivia Johnson allowed herself one moment of pure satisfaction. Harrison had refused to shake her hand because he thought she was beneath him. Now his entire world was beneath her feet, and she was deciding whether to rebuild it or let it burn. The choice, she realized, had never been easier. Outside San Francisco glittered with promise and possibility. Somewhere in the city, the Handshake 73 were planning their next moves. In boardrooms across the valley, executives were having uncomfortable conversations about their own biases. And in a house in Palo Alto, Margaret Harrison and her daughter were drafting the charter for their new nonprofit, funded by the woman Leonard Harrison had dismissed as staff. The revolution hadn't started with a bang or a manifesto or a march. It had started with 6 words and a refused handshake. But like all real revolutions once it began, it was impossible to stop. Olivia's phone lit up with a notification from the Wall Street Journal. Breaking Equity Partners announces formation with $50 billion in committed capital promises, fundamental restructuring of venture capital. Sarah, Olivia said, "Did you already send the announcement?" Sarah smiled innocently. "You said to be ready. The moment you agreed on the name, I hit send. It's already on every major financial newswire." "The market's going to go insane tomorrow," Marcus predicted. "Good," Olivia said. "Chaos creates opportunity, and we're going to seize every single one." As her team and new partners continued planning late into the night, Olivia stepped out onto her office balcony. The November air was cool and clean after the day's storm. Below, the city hummed with life and energy, unaware that the rules of the game had fundamentally changed. She thought about Harrison probably sitting alone somewhere watching his life's work evaporate. She thought about the Handshake 73 free for the first time to pursue opportunities that matched their talents. She thought about all the brilliant minds that would now have access to capital, to networks, to the chance they deserved. And she thought about that moment barely 12 hours ago, when Harrison had looked at her extended hand with disgust and chosen bigotry over billions. His loss. Literally, figuratively, completely. The revolution was just beginning. The hostile takeover began at dawn, orchestrated with the precision of a military operation. While San Francisco slept, Olivia's team and the newly formed equity partners executed synchronized moves across global markets. By the time Terranova's skeleton crew arrived at their offices, they found their company under siege from an enemy they hadn't seen coming. Marcus stood before a wall of screens in Johnson Capital's war room, tracking every trade, every share movement, every nervous flutter of Terranova's dying stock price. "We've acquired 14% through the Tokyo Exchange," he announced. "Another 9% through London. The Frankfurt markets open in 30 minutes. "Total position?" Olivia asked, sipping coffee that had gone cold hours ago. 23% and climbing. We'll have controlling interest by noon." Diane Chen was on 3 phones simultaneously coordinating with institutional investors who'd been waiting for exactly this moment to dump their Terranova holdings. Amara worked her tablet with fierce concentration, running algorithms that predicted market movements down to the microsecond. Jennifer Martinez paced the room like a caged predator, managing media strategy with the same ruthlessness she'd once applied to building her fintech empire. "The board's calling an emergency session," Sarah announced, monitoring internal communications through sources that remained mysteriously well-informed. "They're considering a poison pill defense." "Let them," Olivia said calmly. "Priya, execute the nuclear option." Priya's fingers flew across her keyboard. Within seconds, a carefully crafted email went out to every Terranova employee below senior management level. The subject line was simple: "Your future has value." The email contained a standing offer from equity partners to hire any Terranova employee who resigned within the next 48 hours, with a 20% salary increase and full benefits starting immediately. It also contained something else, a detailed breakdown of how much equity they could have earned if Terranova had implemented proper profit sharing instead of enriching only senior leadership. "You're stealing their entire workforce," Jennifer asked, impressed despite herself. "I'm giving their workforce options," Olivia corrected, something Harrison never did. Her phone rang. Lawrence Whitman again, but this time his voice held something beyond desperation. It held rage. "This is corporate piracy," he snarled. "We'll sue you into oblivion." "On what grounds?" Olivia asked pleasantly. "Offering employment to at-will workers, making competitive stock purchases on open markets." "Please, Mr. Whitman, tell me which law I'm breaking." "You're destroying a company out of spite." "I'm acquiring a company through legal means. What happens to it afterward is a business decision. Though, if you're concerned about destruction, you might want to check your email. I believe your chief technology officer just submitted his resignation. Along with... What was it, Marcus? 43 members of the engineering team, Marcus supplied helpfully. 44 now, 45. The sound Whitman made was almost inhuman. "What do you want?" "I want you to stop calling me. Your time would be better spent updating your resume, Mr. Whitman. Equity partners won't be needing your services." She hung up and turned to find Michael standing in the doorway with an expression of awe mixed with concern. "Ms. Johnson, there's someone here you need to see. He doesn't have an appointment, but he says he's Harrison's son." The room went silent. Olivia and Diane exchanged glances. Harrison had never mentioned a son in any of his public profiles. "Send him in," Olivia said after a moment. "But have security standing by." The man who entered looked nothing like Leonard Harrison. Where the father was all sharp angles and aggressive presence, the son he introduced himself as David was soft-spoken, almost apologetic in his bearing. Mixed race. Olivia realized with a start, seeing his father's features blended with what must have been his mother's Asian heritage. "Ms. Johnson." David began, his voice carefully controlled. "I need you to understand something about my father." "I understand plenty about your father." "No," David said firmly, the first sign of steel showing through. "You understand what he became, not why." Olivia gestured to a chair. The room remained tense, everyone waiting to see where this would lead. David sat pulling out a photograph old worn at the edges. It showed a much younger Leonard Harrison standing next to a beautiful Asian woman, both smiling, a baby in their arms. "My mother was Korean," David said. "Dad met her when he was stationed in Seoul military service. They fell in love, got married, had me. For 3 years he was a different person. Then they came back to the States." He paused, the memory clearly painful. This was 1985. Do you have any idea what it was like for an interracial couple with a mixed-race child in corporate America in 1985? Every job Dad applied for, every opportunity, evaporated the moment they met Mom. Doors that had been opened slammed shut. Promotions that had been promised disappeared. "That doesn't excuse," Jennifer began, but David held up his hand. "I'm not excusing anything. I'm explaining. Dad's mentor, a man he idolized, told him straight out that Mom and I were career suicide. That if he wanted to succeed, he needed to fix his image problem. Mom left him rather than be hidden away like something shameful. Took me with her. And Dad. Dad learned the wrong lesson. He decided that if the system demanded conformity, he'd become its perfect soldier. He buried everything that made him different, everything that might mark him as other, and he climbed that ladder by becoming exactly what they wanted him to be." "A racist?" Amara asked coldly. "A mirror," David corrected. Reflecting back their own prejudices, amplifying them, until he couldn't tell where they ended, and he began. He married his second wife. Harrison isn't even his real name. He took hers because she was blonde and blue-eyed and came from old money. Had 2 more kids who looked exactly like what success was supposed to look like. And he spent 30 years pretending I didn't exist. Olivia studied the younger man, seeing pain layered beneath resignation. Why are you telling me this? Because the man you're destroying isn't the man in this picture. That man died a long time ago. What's left is just the monster the system created and rewarded. You're not fighting Leonard Harrison. You're fighting what corporate America turned him into. That's a convenient narrative, Diane said sharply. Poor Leonard forced to become a bigot by circumstance. It's not convenient, David replied. It's tragic. And it's why I'm here. I work in tech too, Ms. Johnson. Back-end development at a startup you've probably never heard of. I've watched my father's career for 20 years, watched him destroy others the way he felt he was destroyed. When I saw what happened yesterday, what you did, I knew I had to come. He reached into his bag and pulled out a laptop. This is every email my father sent me over the years, all 3 of them, plus the ones he sent my mother during their divorce, the ones where he begged her to be reasonable and understand the situation, and the ones he sent to his lawyer trying to minimize child support because I was not part of his real family. The room was completely silent. David pushed the laptop across the table to Olivia. There's also something else. Records of every person my father personally blocked from advancement at Terranova. Not just women and minorities, anyone who reminded him of what he gave up. Anyone whose excellence threatened the narrative he'd built. It's all there. Names, dates, even recordings of meetings where he sabotaged careers. He kept records because he was proud of it. Proud of protecting what he called standards. Why? Olivia asked. Why give this to me? David stood the photograph still in his hand. Because someone needs to stop the cycle. My father chose wrong 30 years ago, and he's been choosing wrong every day since. But every person he rejected, every career he destroyed, they were all people like my mother, like me, like you. And maybe if his fall is public enough, spectacular enough, complete enough, the next Leonard Harrison will choose differently. He moved toward the door, then paused. Also, Ms. Johnson, that startup I mentioned working for. We're developing AI-assisted diagnostic tools for underserved communities. We could use funding. When you're done burying my father's company, maybe you could help build something better. After he left the room, remained silent for a long moment. Finally, Amara spoke. That was unexpected. The sins of the father, Jennifer murmured. Literally. Olivia opened David's laptop, scanning through the documents. The evidence was damning beyond anything Stein had provided. This wasn't just discrimination. It was systematic, deliberate, documented destruction of careers that threatened Harrison's worldview. Sarah, she said quietly. Get me the editors at the Washington Post, New York Times, and Financial Times. This goes wide, all of it. That'll destroy more than just Harrison, Marcus warned. Every executive who enabled him, every board member who looked the other way. Good, Olivia said flatly. They all made choices. Now they face consequences. Her phone buzzed with an alert from Priya. We just hit 35% ownership. Also, something's happening at Terranova headquarters. Local news is already there. They turned on the news to find chaos. Hundreds of Terranova employees were walking out en masse, not just resigning, but staging a full exodus. They carried boxes of personal belongings and signs that read, Handshake 73 stands with Olivia, and Dignity over dividends. The reporter was interviewing Aisha Patel, who'd become an inadvertent spokesperson for the movement. We're not just leaving because of better offers, she was saying. We're leaving because we finally understand our worth. Ms. Johnson didn't just expose Harrison's bigotry, she showed us we had power. We're taking that power and building something new. How many? Olivia asked. Priya was counting in real time. 400 and rising. At this rate, Terranova won't have enough staff to function by tomorrow. Their clients are jumping ship too, James added. Microsoft just announced they're terminating their contracts. Apple's reviewing their relationship. Google's already moved their business to Phoenix Technologies. The door burst open and Michael rushed in. Ms. Johnson Harrison's here, in the lobby. Security's holding him, but he's demanding to see you. Everyone started talking at once, but Olivia held up her hand for silence. She thought about David's photograph, about choices made and unmade, about cycles that needed breaking. Send him up, but keep security close. Olivia, Diane warned, this could be dangerous. Everything about this has been dangerous. At least this danger has a face. Leonard Harrison entered her office like a ghost of his former self. His expensive suit was wrinkled, his silver hair disheveled, his eyes red-rimmed and wild. He looked like he'd aged a decade overnight. Behind him, 2 security guards stood ready, but Harrison barely seemed aware of them. "You win," he said without preamble, his voice hoarse. "You've destroyed everything. My company, my reputation, my marriage, my life. You win." "This was never about winning, Mr. Harrison." "Bullshit." The word exploded from him. "This was always about winning. That's what business is. Winners and losers. Predators and prey. I learned that lesson 30 years ago." "From whom?" Olivia asked, thinking of David's story. Harrison blinked, caught off guard. "What?" "Who taught you that lesson? Who told you that success required sacrificing everything that made you different?" For a moment, something flickered in Harrison's eyes. Pain memory, regret. Then it was gone, replaced by the familiar rage. "It doesn't matter. What matters is what you've done. You've destroyed a company that employed thousands, that created value, that systematically excluded qualified people based on race and gender," Olivia interrupted. "That promoted mediocrity over merit as long as it came in the right package. That company deserved to die, Mr. Harrison." "And what about me?" Harrison's voice cracked. "Did I deserve this complete annihilation?" Olivia stood, moving to face him directly. They were close enough now that she could see the desperation in his eyes, the complete collapse of everything he'd built his identity on. "You had a choice," she said softly. "When I extended my hand, you had a choice. You could have shaken it, heard my proposal, possibly saved your company with a $2 billion investment. Instead, you chose prejudice over profit bias over billions. You didn't just insult me, Mr. Harrison. You revealed who you really are." "I know who I am," Harrison said, but the words lacked conviction. "Do you?" "Because I met your son today." The effect was immediate and devastating. Harrison staggered backward as if physically struck. "David, how?" "He showed me a photograph. You and his mother. You looked happy." "That was a different life," Harrison whispered. "A different person." "No, that was you before you decided that fitting in was more important than standing out. Before you chose the easy wrong over the difficult right." Harrison sank into a chair without being invited, his head in his hands. "You don't understand. The pressure, the expectations, the constant demand to be what they wanted. I'm a black woman running a $50 billion investment firm," Olivia said coldly. "Don't talk to me about pressure or expectations." "But you didn't have to choose," Harrison said desperately. "You didn't have to give up." "I chose every single day," Olivia cut him off. "I chose to be myself despite the cost. I chose excellence despite the obstacles. I chose integrity despite the temptation to conform. You had the same choices, Mr. Harrison. You just made different ones." Harrison looked up at her, and for the first time, she saw him clearly. Not the arrogant CEO, not the bigot who'd refused her handshake, but a man who'd traded his soul for success and spent 30 years trying to convince himself it was worth it. "What happens now?" he asked. "Now, by end of business today, equity partners will own controlling interest in Terra Nova. Your board will be dissolved. Your leadership team will be replaced. The company will be restructured from the ground up, turned into a model for inclusive innovation. It will succeed beyond anything you ever imagined, and it will do so by embracing everything you rejected. And me? You. You're done, Mr. Harrison. No golden parachute, no graceful exit, no rehabilitation tour. You're going to be a case study in business schools, but not the kind you hoped for. You'll be the cautionary tale, the example of what happens when prejudice meets power and loses. Harrison stood slowly like an old man feeling his age. He moved toward the door, then stopped. My son, David. Is he? He's brilliant, Olivia said. Working on technology that could save lives in communities you never cared about. We're going to fund him. A ghost of something pride regret crossed Harrison's face. Good. That's good. He left, then shoulders bowed, footsteps heavy. Olivia watched him go and felt no satisfaction, only a kind of hollow completion. Behind her, her team and partners stood silent, processing what they'd witnessed. That was hard to watch, Sarah said finally. Harder to live? Diane added. Imagine spending 30 years becoming someone you hate. Olivia's phone rang. The caller ID showed the White House. She answered to find President Chen herself on the line. Ms. Johnson, I've been following the developments. The complete collapse of Terranova's leadership, the employee exodus, your acquisition, it's unprecedented. It's necessary, Madam President. I agree, which is why I'm calling. The executive order I mentioned, I want to expand it. Not just federal contracting requirements, but a complete overhaul of equal opportunity enforcement. I want you on the task force. Will you accept? On one condition. The task force includes David Harrison. There was a pause. Leonard Harrison's son. Yes, he understands the cost of conformity better than most. His perspective would be valuable. You're more forgiving than I would be. I'm not forgiving anyone, Olivia clarified. I'm breaking cycles. Leonard Harrison became what he fought against. His son won't make the same mistake, not if he's given the right opportunities. After the call ended, Olivia found herself alone in her office for the first time all day. The sun was setting again, painting San Francisco in shades of gold and amber. Somewhere out there, Leonard Harrison was facing the ruins of his life. Somewhere else, 400 former Terranova employees were planning their futures with companies that would value their talents. And somewhere, David Harrison was probably staring at his laptop, wondering if equity partners would really fund his startup. Her phone buzzed with a final tally from Marcus. We own 51% of Terranova. The company is ours. 51%. Controlling interest. The hostile takeover was complete. In less than 48 hours, she'd gone from a dismissed visitor in Terranova's offices to its majority owner. The handshake Harrison had refused to make had cost him everything. But as Olivia stood watching the city lights begin to twinkle, she knew the real work was just beginning. Owning Terranova was just the first step. Transforming it, proving that inclusive leadership could outperform bigoted legacy, that would be the real victory. Jennifer Martinez knocked and entered holding 2 glasses of champagne. The others are calling, reporters handling logistics. I thought you might want a moment. They stood together at the window, sipping champagne in companionable silence. Finally, Jennifer spoke. You know what the irony is? If Harrison had just shaken your hand, if he'd just treated you with basic respect, he'd still have his company. But then nothing would have changed, Olivia pointed out. Terranova would still be discriminating, just more carefully. The handshake 73 would still be trapped. The system would still be broken. So Harrison's bigotry was actually a gift. Harrison's bigotry was a catalyst. He showed everyone what was hiding beneath the surface. Now we get to show them what's possible when that poison is removed. Her phone lit up with messages from the handshake movement, now numbering in the thousands across multiple companies. Engineers, designers, marketers, leaders, all taking inspiration from a moment of rejection that had become a revolution. Tomorrow, the markets would open to a new reality. Equity Partners would announce its formal takeover of Terranova. The old leadership would be swept away. And in their place would rise something unprecedented, a major tech company built on principles of inclusion, merit, and genuine innovation. But tonight, Olivia Johnson stood in her office, champagne in hand, watching a city transform itself in real time. She thought about Harrison's desperate question, "Did I deserve this?" The answer, she realized, wasn't about deserving. It was about consequences. For 30 years, Harrison had faced no consequences for his choices. He'd risen through a system that rewarded his conformity, his discrimination, his soul-destroying compromise. That system had created him, nurtured him, protected him. Until it hadn't. Until a black woman with $50 billion in assets had walked into his office and held up a mirror he couldn't look away from. The revolution wasn't complete, might never be complete, but it had begun. And it had begun with 6 words that would echo through corporate history: "I don't shake hands with staff." Harrison had meant them as a dismissal. They'd become his epitaph. The transformation of Terranova began before dawn on a Monday that would reshape Silicon Valley forever. Olivia arrived at the company's headquarters at 5 a.m., accompanied by her transition team and a documentary crew from PBS who'd been granted exclusive access to film the historic takeover. The building that had once rejected her now belonged to her, but she felt no triumph walking through its doors, only the weight of responsibility for the thousands of careers hanging in the balance. The security guard at reception, an older black man named William, stood as she approached. His eyes held a mixture of awe and something deeper, more personal. "Ms. Johnson," he said, his voice thick with emotion. "I've worked here 15 years. 15 years of watching people who look like me get turned away at these doors. Today," he paused, composing himself, "today feels like Judgment Day." "Today is Resurrection Day," Olivia corrected gently. "This company died last week. Today we build something new." The executive floor was eerily empty, abandoned by leadership who'd fled rather than face the reckoning. Olivia stood in Harrison's former office, its ostentatious displays of wealth and power now seeming pathetic rather than impressive. The wall of vanity photos showed Harrison with politicians, celebrities, titans of industry, all white, all male, all representing a world that had protected its own until it couldn't anymore. Marcus entered with a tablet full of urgent updates. "The markets open in 3 hours. We need your statement ready. Also, 3 board members are threatening legal action claiming the takeover was illegally orchestrated." "Let them," Olivia said, turning from the wall of photos. "Discovery will be fascinating when they have to explain why they ignored years of discrimination complaints. What's our employee retention looking like?" "Better than expected. The handshake movement actually helped us. The ones who left were mostly the problematic ones. Middle management is almost entirely intact, and they're eager for real leadership." Sarah arrived with coffee and a warning. "There's a crowd gathering outside. Former employees, activists, media. They're calling it a celebration, but SFPD is nervous." Through Harrison's floor-to-ceiling windows, Olivia could see them assembling in the plaza below. Hundreds of people, many carrying signs, some with photos of careers derailed by Terranova's discrimination. It wasn't a protest, she realized. It was a vigil for lost opportunities. "I should speak to them," she decided. "That's not advisable," Marcus warned. "Security risk potential for negative optics. Those people are why we're here. They deserve acknowledgement." She descended through the building, noting how employees stopped to watch her pass. Some applauded, others simply stared, everyone understanding they were witnessing history. The lobby filled as word spread that she was heading outside. By the time she reached the main entrance, hundreds of Terranova employees had gathered behind her. The crowd outside fell silent as she emerged. The morning sun cast long shadows across the plaza, and for a moment, nobody moved. Then Aisha Patel stepped forward from the crowd, the woman whose message had started it all. "Ms. Johnson." Aisha said, her voice carrying across the plaza through a portable speaker someone had brought. "We wanted to be here when you took over. To witness the moment things finally changed." Olivia accepted the offered microphone, looking out at faces that reflected every shade of humanity, every background the old Terranova had rejected. "I stand here not as a conqueror," she began, "but as a consequence. For decades, this company chose prejudice over potential conformity, over creativity, fear over future. That ends today." A cheer went up, but she raised her hand for quiet. "But ending discrimination isn't enough. We must build something better. Every person here who was rejected, overlooked, dismissed. You were told you weren't good enough. That was a lie. And now we're going to prove it." "How?" someone shouted from the crowd. "By turning Terranova into what it should have been. A place where talent matters more than melanin. Where innovation comes from inclusion. Where the best ideas win regardless of who presents them. But I need your help. Those of you who left, consider coming back. Those who stayed, prepare for real change. And those who were never given a chance, apply now. We're hiring." The crowd erupted in genuine celebration this time, but Olivia was already being pulled back inside by security. There'd been a development. Jennifer Martinez was on the phone, her voice tense. "We have a problem. Chen Okafor and I are at my office. Someone leaked our entire strategy to Bloomberg. They're about to publish details about equity partners that we haven't announced yet." "What kind of details?" "Everything. Our funding, sources, our acquisition targets, even private communications between us. Someone on the inside is sabotaging us." Olivia felt a chill run down her spine. They'd been so focused on the external battle that they'd forgotten to watch for internal threats. "I'll be right there. Lock down all communications until we figure out who." "Olivia." It was Priya bursting into the office with her laptop. "You need to see this. The leak, it's not coming from our side." She pulled up a complex data trail on her screen. The IP addresses, the digital fingerprints, they all trace back to one source. Richard Stein. Stein. But he helped us. He gave us evidence against Harrison. "To save himself," Priya said grimly. "Look at this. He's been playing both sides. While feeding us information about Harrison, he was also documenting our every move, building a case that the takeover was orchestrated through illegal means. He's trying to position himself as a whistleblower who discovered a conspiracy." The betrayal stung, but Olivia's mind was already working through countermoves. He wants to be the hero of his own story. The one who exposed corruption on both sides. What's Bloomberg's timeline? Article goes live at market open. 90 minutes. Get me Jennifer, Diane, and Amara on a secure line. Now. The next hour was controlled chaos. While Priya worked to trace every communication Stein might have accessed, Olivia coordinated with her partners to craft a response that would turn Stein's betrayal into further evidence of Terranova's toxic culture. "He's claiming you manipulated the market," Jennifer reported. "That the employee walkout was orchestrated, that the stock manipulation was deliberate. All of which is legal," Diane interrupted. "Offering competitive employment, buying stock on open markets, revealing truthful information about corporate culture. He's got nothing." "He's got narrative," Amara corrected. "In the court of public opinion, narrative matters more than law." Olivia made a decision that surprised everyone. "We're going to let him publish." "What?" Marcus nearly dropped his coffee. "Olivia, this could destroy equity partners before it truly begins." "No, it reveals exactly why change is necessary. Stein is the perfect example of the Terranova mindset, playing all sides, betraying everyone, focused only on personal survival." "Sarah, I want you to prepare a response that includes every communication we have with Stein. Show the world exactly who he is." "That's risky," Sarah warned. "If we reveal our communications, we reveal our strategies." "Our strategies are simple. Invest in overlooked talent demand, inclusive leadership, and build better companies. If that's a conspiracy, I'll gladly be guilty of it." The Bloomberg article went live at 9:30 a.m. Eastern, just as markets opened. "Inside the hostile takeover, How Johnson Capital Orchestrated Terranova's Fall," read the headline. Stein was quoted extensively, painting himself as a reformed insider who'd discovered a massive conspiracy to destroy American businesses through weaponized diversity politics. The response was immediate, and not what Stein had expected. Instead of turning against Olivia, the market shrugged. Terranova's stock, now under equity partners' control, actually rose 3%. The comments section filled with support for Olivia, with many noting that everything described in the article sounded like good business practice, not conspiracy. But the real blow to Stein came from an unexpected source. David Harrison Leonard's son published his own article on Medium that went viral within minutes. The Real Richard Stein, A Coward's Tale, detailed every time Stein had sat silent during discriminatory decisions, every talented person he'd helped reject, every moment he'd chosen, complicity over courage. Stein wants to be the hero now, David wrote, but heroes don't wait until the building is burning to point out the fire. They don't collect evidence of wrongdoing for years while allowing that wrongdoing to continue. Richard Stein is not a whistleblower. He's an opportunist who realized too late that he'd backed the wrong horse. Olivia was reading David's piece when her assistant knocked urgently. "Ms. Johnson, there's been a development. Harrison is here. Not Leonard, Margaret Harrison. She's in the lobby with someone she says you need to meet." The lobby had been transformed into an impromptu command center for the transition, with new employees being processed, old systems being updated, and the general controlled chaos of corporate metamorphosis. Margaret Harrison stood near the entrance, impeccably dressed despite the early hour, her expression unreadable. Beside her stood a young woman who could only be her daughter, the one who'd been told engineering wasn't suitable for women. "Ms. Johnson," Margaret said formally, "this is my daughter Catherine. She has something she needs to tell you." Catherine Harrison was 28, with her father's sharp features softened by her mother's grace. She held a tablet clutched against her chest like armor and spoke with the careful precision of someone who'd rehearsed their words. "I've been inside Terranova's systems for 3 years, she said without preamble, not as an employee, as a ghost. Olivia's security team tensed, but she held up a hand for them to wait. "Explain." "When my father told me engineering wasn't for women, I decided to prove him wrong in a way he'd never forget. I've been documenting everything. Every discriminatory decision, every qualified candidate rejected for culture fit, every time profit was sacrificed for prejudice. 3 years of data, all gathered remotely, all completely illegal by conventional standards. You hacked your father's company. I freed information that should have been public. There are 87 discrimination lawsuits that were settled quietly buried in NDAs. There are emails explicitly discussing racial quotas not for inclusion, but for exclusion. There are recorded conversations where my father and his leadership team laugh about keeping the barbarians at the gate." She held out the tablet. "It's all here. Every dirty secret, every buried scandal, every crime hidden behind corporate privilege. I'm giving it to you with one condition, which is, you hire me, not for my name, not for revenge, but because I'm the best systems architect you'll ever find. I want to help build what Terranova should have been, what my father was too cowardly to create." Margaret Harrison spoke for the first time since the introduction. "I knew what she was doing. I helped her. Every family dinner where Leonard bragged about his conquests, every country club conversation where his friends complained about diversity hires. I recorded them. It's all there, too." The lobby had gone completely silent. Everyone within earshot had stopped working, sensing the magnitude of what was happening. 3 generations of Harrison family stood in that space, the patriarch who'd built an empire on exclusion, the wife who'd documented his crimes, and the daughter who'd become everything he'd said she couldn't be. Olivia took the tablet, feeling its weight, like holding a loaded weapon. This information could destroy more than just Terranova. The connections, the network of discrimination you're describing, it goes throughout Silicon Valley. "Good," Catherine said flatly. "Let it burn. Let them all burn. Build something better from the ashes." "Ms. Johnson," Margaret added, "my soon-to-be ex-husband thought he was building a legacy. He was right, just not the legacy he intended. His true legacy will be the revolution his bigotry started, the changes his hatred made necessary. Before Olivia could respond, her phone erupted with alerts. Priya's voice came through urgent and confused. Olivia, something's happening. Terranova's stock is skyrocketing, up 20% in 5 minutes. Someone's buying massively. Who? I'm trying to trace it, but the purchases are coming through dozens of shell companies. Whoever this is has serious resources and weight. Oh my God. Olivia, it's a consortium. Microsoft, Apple, Google, Amazon, Meta, they're all buying in. Together. The implications hit everyone simultaneously. The tech giants, usually fierce competitors, were collaborating to invest in the new Terranova. It was unprecedented, a vote of confidence that would make the company instantly viable. Jennifer's voice came through the phone speaker. I'm getting calls from their CEOs. They want to meet, all of them, today. They're calling it the New Valley Initiative. They want equity partners to lead a complete restructuring of tech industry culture. It's happening. Amara said, her voice filled with wonder. The revolution is actually happening. But Olivia's attention was drawn to movement outside. A crowd was forming again, but this time it was different. These were Terranova employees, current ones, and they were carrying boxes. For a moment, she thought it was another walkout. Then she saw what was in the boxes. Photos. The old guards' vanity walls were being dismantled, their shrines to exclusion being carried out like bodies from a battlefield. In their place, employees were hanging new images, diverse faces, innovative projects, celebrations of actual achievement rather than inherited privilege. Ms. Johnson. William, the security guard, appeared at her elbow. You should see this. He led her to the executive elevator, the one with gold doors that she'd been told not to use on that first fatal visit. Someone had taped a sign over the control panel, for all employees, excellence has no color. They rode up in silence to the executive floor where a transformation was underway. Harrison's office was being stripped of its pretensions. The massive oak desk that had served as a barrier between him and the world was being removed, replaced with a collaborative workspace. The throne-like chair from which he'd ruled was gone, replaced with standard office furniture that suggested work rather than worship. But it was the wall of photos that made Olivia stop. The images of Harrison with his powerful friends hadn't just been removed, they'd been replaced. Now the wall showed the faces of every person Terranova had rejected who'd gone on to success elsewhere. Amara Okafor's quantum computing breakthrough. David Chen's venture capital victories. Hundreds of faces, hundreds of stories of excellence that Terranova had missed because it came in the wrong package. At the center of the wall, someone had hung a simple placard with 6 words. I don't shake hands with staff. Below it in smaller text, the 6 most expensive words in corporate history. Who did this? Olivia asked. We all did, said a voice from behind. She turned to find a group of employees, maybe 30 of them, standing in the doorway. The woman who'd spoken stepped forward. We've been here all night. Every department contributed. We wanted you to see that we're ready for real change. Olivia's phone rang. It was the White House. President Chen's chief of staff spoke quickly. The president has been following the developments. She's calling an emergency session of the Economic Council. She wants to introduce legislation making discrimination in corporate settings a federal crime with personal liability for executives. She's calling it the Johnson Act. That's not necessary. With respect, Ms. Johnson, it is. What happened to you happens every day to people who don't have $50 billion to fight back with. The president wants to ensure it never happens again. As the call ended, Marcus appeared with news that sent another shockwave through the building. Leonard Harrison just held a press conference. You need to see this. They gathered around a screen to watch Harrison, looking older and smaller than he'd ever appeared, standing at a podium in what looked like a community center. He was flanked by his son David, and surprisingly, his first wife, David's mother. I stand here today to announce that I am entering treatment, Harrison said, his voice rough. Not for substance abuse, but for something perhaps more destructive: decades of learned prejudice and systematic discrimination. I spent 30 years becoming someone I'm ashamed of. 30 years choosing fear over fairness, conformity over courage. I destroyed careers, families, and ultimately myself in service of a system that demanded I reject my own son, my own family, my own values. He paused, seeming to gather strength. I cannot undo the harm I've caused, but I can ensure that my story serves as a warning. I am establishing the Harrison Foundation for Corporate Justice with my remaining personal assets, approximately $300 million, to fund legal support for discrimination victims and to advocate for systemic change. My son David will run it because he became the man I should have been. The press conference continued, but Olivia had stopped listening. She was watching David Harrison's face as his father publicly acknowledged him for the first time in 20 years. The pain and possibility written there was almost too private to witness. "He's trying to rehabilitate himself," Marcus said cynically. "No," Margaret Harrison said from behind them. She'd entered the office silently, Catherine beside her. "He's trying to die with a shred of dignity. The doctors gave him 6 months. Pancreatic cancer stage 4. He found out the day before Ms. Johnson walked into his office. That's why he was so aggressive, so desperate to close the deal. He thought Terranova was all he'd leave behind." The room absorbed this in stunned silence. Harrison's desperation, his rage, his collapse, it all took on a different cast, knowing he'd been facing mortality while clinging to a legacy built on sand. "Does it change anything?" Catherine asked her mother. "No," Margaret said firmly. "Dying doesn't absolve him. But maybe, just maybe, his last act can be something other than selfish." Olivia's phone buzzed with a message from Aisha Patel. "Look outside." From Harrison's former office, she could see the plaza. It was filled with people, thousands now, not just former employees or activists, but current tech workers from across the valley. They held signs that said, "Merit not melanin," and "Excellence has no color," and "The handshake heard round the valley." But what struck Olivia most was the diversity: every face, every color, every background that Silicon Valley had tried to exclude was represented in that crowd. "They're from every major tech company," Sarah reported, reading from her phone. "They're calling for industry-wide reforms. Twitter's trending worldwide with #JohnsonEffect." The documentary crew that had been filming quietly all day approached Olivia. The director, an older black woman named Patricia, asked the question that would become the film's central theme. "Ms. Johnson, what do you think Leonard Harrison would say if he could see this?" Olivia looked out at the crowd at the dismantled office, at the Harrison women standing ready to build rather than destroy, at her own team, preparing to transform an empire built on exclusion into an engine of innovation. "I think he'd say he should have shaken my hand." The rest of the day blurred into a symphony of change. The tech giant CEOs arrived for their unprecedented meeting, where they signed a compact committing $200 billion to diversity initiatives. The Johnson Act passed the House with bipartisan support, heading to the Senate with momentum that seemed unstoppable. Richard Stein's attempted sabotage backfired spectacularly when prosecutors announced they were investigating him for insider trading based on evidence he'd accidentally included in his own leaks. But the moment that would define the transformation came at sunset. Olivia stood in what had been Harrison's office, now stripped of its pretensions and filled with collaborative energy. Catherine Harrison was at a whiteboard architecting new systems that would make Terranova's technology as inclusive as its new culture. Margaret Harrison was on the phone with her divorce attorney, calmly dismantling the last of her husband's protective barriers. The handshake movement members were throughout the building, bringing their talents to bear on problems they'd never been allowed to solve before. Sarah approached with final numbers for the day. Market close. Terranova's stock is up 47%. It's the biggest single-day gain in tech history. Equity Partners' initial investment has already doubled in value. "And Harrison?" Olivia asked. "Checked into the treatment facility. His last public statement was 2 words, 'I'm sorry.'" "Too little, too late," Marcus said. But not nothing, Olivia replied. Even the smallest apology can begin something larger. As night fell over San Francisco, Olivia stood where Harrison had once refused her handshake. The city glittered below each light, representing dreams and possibilities and potential that no amount of prejudice could permanently suppress. Tomorrow would bring new challenges, restructuring a company, implementing revolutionary changes, proving that inclusion could outperform exclusion. But tonight, she allowed herself one moment of complete satisfaction. Leonard Harrison had thought he was dismissing an inferior when he'd refused to shake her hand. Instead, he'd lit a fuse that exploded not just his own empire, but the entire architecture of exclusion that Silicon Valley had built over decades. The phone rang one last time. It was David Harrison calling from his father's hospital room. "Ms. Johnson, he wants to speak with you. I know you have no obligation." "Put him on." Leonard Harrison's voice was weak, stripped of its old arrogance. "Ms. Johnson, Olivia, I wanted to say—" "I know what you want to say, Mr. Harrison, and I appreciate it. But apologies don't erase harm. They just acknowledge it." I know. I wanted to tell you something. That morning when you walked into my office, some part of me knew you were exceptional, knew you deserved respect, knew I was making a mistake. But I'd spent so long being what they wanted me to be that I couldn't stop myself. I'd forgotten how to be anything else. And now I'm dying. And my legacy is 6 words that will follow my name forever. I don't shake hands with staff. That's what I'll be remembered for. Not the company I built, not the success I achieved, but the moment I revealed who I really was. That's not entirely true, Olivia said. You'll also be remembered for what came after. The changes your bigotry made necessary. The revolution your prejudice started. The future your past made possible. There was silence on the line, then a sound that might have been crying. I should have shaken your hand. Yes, Olivia agreed simply. You should have. The line went dead. Harrison would live another 4 months, long enough to see Terranova's complete transformation, long enough to watch his son David become everything he'd failed to be, long enough to witness the Johnson Act signed into law with his name attached as the cautionary example. But that was still to come. Tonight, Olivia Johnson stood in an office that had once rejected her, in a building that now belonged to her vision, in a city that would never be quite the same. She thought about handshakes refused and opportunities missed, about cycles broken and futures reclaimed, about the price of prejudice and the value of justice. Someone had left a bottle of champagne on the desk with a note. To the woman who turned a handshake into a revolution. She poured a glass, raised it to the city lights, and made a silent toast to everyone who'd ever been told they didn't belong. Tomorrow, they would build the future. Tonight, they owned it.